Sometimes life puts the right person in the darkest place. Sometimes, when everyone else looks away, one heart quietly decides to care. The night smelled like rain and dust as Alina finished scrubbing the marble floors of the old hotel. She was a poor maid, paid little, noticed by no one, moving through the grand hallways like a shadow people forgot existed. Her feet hurt. Her hands were cracked from cleaning chemicals, but she still whispered a thank you to God for another day of work. Outside, the city felt colder than usual. Streets hummed with late traffic. Distant thunder rolled. Alina wrapped her cheap sweater around herself and hurried toward the back exit where the staff usually slipped out unnoticed. That was when she heard it. A soft, trembling sound. Not quite a cry, not quite a breath, something fragile, like a secret trying not to be found. Oh, she stopped. The sound came again. Carefully, she followed it toward the alley beside the hotel. The light flickered from the old lamppost, throwing long shadows across wet pavement. And there, near a wooden crate, she saw something that froze her heart. A little girl, no older than 6, wrapped in a thin blanket, shaking, eyes wide with fear. Alina knelt slowly so she wouldn't scare her. "Hey, sweetheart, what are you doing here?" she whispered softly. The child didn't answer. Her gaze was distant, like she had seen something far too heavy for a soul that small. And then Alina noticed something strange. Around the girl's tiny wrist was a silver bracelet, intricate, ancient, carved with symbols she had never seen before. It shimmered faintly, almost alive. A chill swept through Alina. This wasn't normal. This wasn't random. Someone had left this child here. Someone powerful. Carefully, Alina reached out and wrapped the girl in her arms, trying to give warmth she barely had herself. "Oh, you're safe, it's okay, I've got you," she whispered. But the night changed. Suddenly, the air grew still. The wind stopped. Even the distant city noise faded, like the world was holding its breath. Then she felt it. A presence. Not loud, not violent. Just overwhelming. From the shadows at the far end of the alley, a tall figure stepped forward. Black coat, pale skin, eyes that glowed softly like embers hidden behind winter frost. He didn't move like a man. He moved like night itself, calm, controlled, ancient. The girl's fingers tightened on Elena's shirt. For a moment, fear crawled up Elena's spine. She had heard whispers about a ruler who walked in darkness, a king no one dared name, a legend mothers used to scare children into being quiet. But the man standing there wasn't a monster. His face carried something else. A grief, a emptiness, a broken kind of loneliness. His eyes lowered, and when he saw the child in Alina's arms, something inside him shattered so quietly it almost sounded like a prayer. He took one slow step forward, then another, not threatening, not angry, just hurting. His voice came out soft and it trembled. "Who found her?" Alina swallowed. Her heart pounded. She could not explain why, but looking into his eyes felt like looking at a storm that had lost its way. "I did," she whispered. The vampire king closed his eyes for a brief second, as if gathering pieces of himself he had long buried. When he opened them again, they were deeper, full of memories, regret, and something dangerously close to love. And then the truth slid into Alina's chest like a quiet dawn. This little girl was not just any child. She belonged to him. But why was she abandoned? Why was she left in the cold? Why did the king, powerful, feared, eternal, look like a father who had just been told his entire world was breaking apart? The rain finally began to fall, soft and slow, like tears the sky couldn't hold anymore. The Vampire King took one more step, his voice barely more than a whisper. Give her to me. But there was something else beneath his words. A play, a promise, and a fear so deep it felt like it might destroy him. Alina hesitated, not out of defiance, but because the girl clung tighter, her tiny voice finally breaking through in a trembling whisper. Please don't let him take me. And in that single moment, everything changed. The girl's whisper felt fragile, like it might break if anyone spoke too loudly. Don't let him take me. The words echoed inside Alina's chest, and her arms instinctively tightened around the child. Not in defiance, but in protection, the way any human heart reacts when it feels fear coming from someone so small. Well, the Vampire King stopped. For a long, silent second, he didn't move at all. Rain slid down his face, but it wasn't rain that made his eyes look like they were shining. Something deeper lived there, pain layered over centuries, mixed with guilt he didn't have words for. Slowly, he lowered his gaze to the ground, like he didn't trust himself to come any closer. I won't hurt you, he said softly. There was no power in his tone, no command, only truth that sounded tired. The girl buried her face in Elena's shoulder. Alina swallowed, heart racing. Everything about him felt impossible, the terrifying legends and yet the quiet sadness. She forced herself to speak, voice shaking but respectful. Why was she left here? He took a breath, like the question itself was heavy. Someone wanted me to find her, he said, barely audible, but not like this. His hands curled slowly at his sides, as if he was holding back something fierce, not anger toward them, but anger toward himself. Thunder rolled gently in the distance. Alina looked at the silver bracelet. Its symbols glowed faintly again, reacting to the man in front of them. She's afraid, Alina whispered. She thinks you'll take her somewhere dark. The king's jaw tightened. Because darkness is all she has ever been told about me. He lifted his eyes, and in them, Alina saw it. A father terrified of what he had become in his daughter's imagination. He took one small step forward, then stopped again and knelt, lowering himself so he wouldn't tower over them. His movements were slow, careful, humble. The child peeked out just a little. Their eyes met. And suddenly, the king did something unexpected. He bowed his head, quietly, like a king bowing to someone far more important than himself. Little one, he said gently, I am not here to take you away. I am here because I failed you and I am trying to make that right. His voice broke on the last word. Alina felt something crack inside her chest. This wasn't a monster. This was a man who had lived too long without knowing how to love without hurting those he cared for. The girl whispered, barely breathing, then why did Mama say you were dangerous? The rain slowed, the world seemed to listen. He closed his eyes before answering. Because sometimes, he said, power makes people forget that a heart still exists behind it. People fear what they don't understand, and sometimes they are right. But there was no pride in his voice, only regret. A shadow of decisions that once made sense, but now haunted him. The girl's fingers loosened just slightly on Alina's clothes, uncertainty replacing pure fear. Alina looked between them. If you care for her, why was she left alone? A silence pressed in. His eyes lifted to Alina, honest, wounded, unshielded. I trusted the wrong hands to protect her, he said, and someone decided to punish me through her. The words felt heavier than stone. He reached out but stopped halfway, refusing to touch without permission. His hand trembled. A king, afraid to reach for his own child. That small detail said everything. The girl studied him, breathing slow and shaky. Something in his face, not his power, not his status, but his sadness, spoke to her in a language only hearts understand. "Are you really my father?" she whispered. He didn't answer with words. A single tear finally slipped down his pale cheek. And that was enough. The bracelet glowed brighter. The rain stopped. The city noise returned like the world had been frozen and suddenly remembered how to move. The girl loosened completely, confusion mixing with hope. But before any peace could take root, a faint echo drifted through the alley. A distant set of footsteps. A measured, a deliberate, watching. The king's expression changed, not angry, but alert, deeply protective. He slowly rose to his feet, voice calm but urgent. "We are not alone." Alina felt the chill return, sharper than before. Whoever had abandoned this child might not be finished yet. And somewhere hidden beyond the shadows, someone paused as if listening before fading back into the dark. The king turned to Alina, his tone gentle but firm. "Stay close, and whatever happens, do not let go of her." For the first time, Alina realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. The most dangerous thing in this alley wasn't the vampire king. It was the fear of losing the little girl standing between them. The alley felt narrower now, like the walls themselves had begun to listen. Alina held the little girl closer, feeling the tiny heartbeat flutter against her chest. The vampire king stood still for a moment, eyes scanning the shadows not like a hunter, but like someone searching for the source of an ache he already expected. The night carried a faint scent of metal and smoke. Someone had been here. Someone who didn't want to be seen. Who is it?" Alina whispered. His voice was low, steady, controlled. "Someone who believes children are weapons." Those words hurt more than they sounded. The child pressed her face into Alina again. The king softened instantly, sensing her fear, and deliberately lowered his tone further. "No one will touch you, not while I am breathing." There was no threat in his voice, only a quiet promise. He turned back to Alina. "May I walk beside you?" he asked gently, as if asking permission to exist in their space. That humility surprised her. She nodded. They moved slowly toward the small service door that led back into the hotel kitchen. The warm smell of bread and soap floated faintly through the opening, and the sudden light felt like a fragile shield against the dark. Inside, the kitchen was empty, night shift gone, machines silent, tables wiped clean. Alina set the girl on a chair and wrapped a clean towel around her shoulders. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. The king didn't sit. He stood at a respectful distance, like he was afraid his presence might shatter something delicate. The girl watched him with wide eyes, unsure. Alina found a cup, filled it with warm water, and gently guided it to the child's lips. "Small sips," she murmured. The king watched every movement, gratitude quietly flickering across his face. "You did not have to help," he said softly. Alina shrugged lightly, even though her heart still raced. Someone had to. A faint, almost invisible smile touched his lips, not joy, more like relief that kindness still existed. Then the girl spoke, voice small but brave. "If you are my father, why did you stay away?" The question hit harder than thunder. He didn't hide from it. He took a breath, slow, steady, honest. "Because there are enemies who cannot reach me, so they reach for the ones I love." The truth didn't excuse anything, but it explained everything. His gaze lowered. "I thought hiding you would keep you safe, but the world found you anyway." Pain spread through his words like cracks in glass. The girl's eyes softened, not fully trusting, not fully forgiving, but thinking. Mama said you live where the sun doesn't come. He nodded gently. I live where it cannot hurt me, but that does not mean I chose darkness. That sentence lingered. It sounded less like immortality and more like loneliness. A sudden clang echoed from somewhere deep inside the building. Not loud, just wrong. The king turned instantly, every sense alert. They followed us, he said under his breath. Alina felt her throat tighten. Here inside. He nodded once. They want the bracelet. The child instinctively covered her wrist. Alina frowned. What is it? His eyes softened with memory. It carries my bloodline's protection. Without it, she is vulnerable. With it, she becomes a message. A message to him. A thread. A bargaining chip. The footsteps grew closer, slow, testing, listening. The king looked at Alina, really looked, as if measuring whether he could trust her with something precious. You have courage, he said quietly, but courage is dangerous when it stands alone. He moved closer, still keeping respectful distance, and his voice lowered to a whisper only they could hear. If anything happens, take her into the pantry and lock the door. There is a second exit behind the crates. Do not wait for me. The girl shook her head. No, she whispered, panic rising. Don't leave again. His expression broke. Gentle, helpless, loving. He knelt so their eyes were level. I left once, he said quietly, voice trembling, and I learned what that cost. I am not leaving you now. I only need you to trust me for a few heartbeats. The footsteps stopped just outside the kitchen. The silence stretched, thin as glass. Alina's fingers trembled around the back of the chair. The girl's eyes filled, and the vampire king slowly straightened, shoulders calm, face composed, not like a tyrant, but like a guardian who had finally remembered who he was supposed to be. The door handle turned, very slowly. The king whispered, barely audible, "Stay behind me." The door began to open, and the figure on the other side stepped into the light. The door opened with a soft creak, letting in a thin slice of cold hallway air. A tall man stepped inside, plain clothes, ordinary face, the kind of person no one would remember after passing him on the street. That was what made him dangerous, not the way he looked, but the way he didn't. His eyes, however, were sharp, calculating, too calm. They flicked from the girl to the bracelet to the vampire king. And then he smiled, not kindly, politely, like someone arriving late to a meeting he had planned all along. I was wondering when you'd catch up, he said lightly, as if speaking to an old acquaintance. Well, the vampire king didn't answer. His posture stayed relaxed, but every part of him was ready, controlled, protective. Alina felt the girl's small hand slide into hers. She squeezed it gently, keeping herself steady. The stranger looked at Alina. You must be the maid everyone overlooks, he said, almost conversational. You found something valuable tonight. Alina lifted her chin, even though fear crawled through her chest. She's a child, not a thing. His smile grew slightly. Well, that depends on who you ask. The king finally spoke, voice quiet, cold only in its clarity. Leave now. Well, the stranger tilted his head, amused. You still believe your words make rules. He took one slow step forward. The room felt smaller. The girl pressed closer to Alina, her voice trembling. I don't like him. The king shifted subtly, not toward the threat, but toward her, placing himself instinctively between danger and his daughter. "You are in the wrong place," he said softly, "and you will not walk out with her." Well, the stranger studied him. "I don't need to walk out with her," he replied calmly. "I only needed you to come." The meaning landed like a quiet thunder. This wasn't about kidnapping. This was about forcing the king to show himself. Alina's breath caught. "Oh, you left her here on purpose," she whispered. Oh, the stranger didn't deny it. "Great rulers only move when there is something they cannot bear to lose," he said. Someone wanted proof of that. Someone, not him, someone above him, someone watching. The king's eyes darkened with a sadness that felt heavier than anger. "There were safer ways," he said quietly. The man shrugged. "Fear works faster." He glanced toward the bracelet again. "Remove it, and our message is complete." The girl instinctively clutched her wrist. Alina stepped slightly in front of her without even thinking. The stranger raised a brow, impressed. "Brave," he said softly, "but unnecessary. We don't harm people who have no value." The insult didn't sting, it revealed everything about him. To him, worth came only from usefulness. The king exhaled slowly, and when he spoke, his voice was no longer fragile. Still gentle, but filled with something steady and unbreakable. "Oh, she is not a message," he said. "She is my daughter." Oh, the stranger's smile faded. Oh, for the first time, he seemed unsure. "Oh, you were never supposed to say that." The king took one calm step forward. "Then tonight," he replied quietly, "something changes." The room seemed to hold still. Not with violence, with decision. The stranger swallowed, reassessing, weighing risk. His confidence faltered just slightly, enough to reveal that whatever power he served was far more terrifying than the king standing in front of him. "They will not like this," he murmured. The king nodded softly. "I know." The girl watched him, not seeing a monster, not seeing legends, just a father choosing to stand. Her fear shifted into something new. A hope. The stranger took a step back toward the door, eyes narrowing. "Well, this isn't finished." The king's answer was calm. "Oh, no, it is." The man disappeared into the hallway, footsteps fading into darkness. The silence returned, but it felt different now. Not empty, heavy with what would come next. Alina let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The little girl gently touched the bracelet, then looked up at the king. "If I keep this, will they still come?" He knelt again, voice soft. "They may try," he admitted, "but they will not take you, not while I stand." Her eyes filled, not with fear, with trust she didn't know how to hold yet. "Then don't leave," she whispered. His answer came without hesitation. "I won't." And yet, under that promise, another question trembled quietly. Where could they possibly go where the shadows wouldn't follow? The kitchen lights hummed softly, the only sound in the quiet after the storm. Alina leaned against the counter, trying to steady her breathing. The girl sat between them, small hands wrapped around the towel, bracelet glinting under the light. The vampire king stood near the doorway, not moving, as if leaving the room might break the fragile safety they had found. He finally spoke. "They will try again," he said quietly. "Not tonight, but soon." Alina frowned. Why not just take her somewhere far away? He gave a tired, almost sorrowful smile. "Because there is no far away for people like me. My world does not end with borders, it follows." His honesty wasn't dramatic, just true. The little girl studied him carefully. Then what do we do? He looked at Alina, not with command, but with something close to respect. Well, we tell the truth, he said. Those words seemed small, but they carried weight. He walked to the table, still keeping a soft distance, and rested his hands gently on the wood as if grounding himself. Your mother, he said slowly, choosing each word with care, did not lie when she said I was dangerous. There were years when I believed power mattered more than compassion, and people suffered because of that. His voice wasn't defending itself. It sounded almost like a confession. Alina watched him, surprised. The girl listened, eyes wide, soaking in every syllable. But the day you were born, he continued, I saw something I had forgotten existed. His gaze softened. Something small, fragile, completely dependent on others to survive. And I realized power means nothing if it cannot protect what is innocent. The silence settled gently across the room. The girl blinked, tears gathering again, but not from fear. From understanding. Then why did you hide me? She whispered. He exhaled deeply. Because loving you made me afraid. I trusted fear more than faith, and someone used that against us. Alina's chest tightened. It wasn't just a king standing there. It was a father learning how to apologize. The girl wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I was lonely, she said softly. I thought I wasn't wanted. The words pierced him. He closed his eyes, pain crossing his face like a shadow. You were never unwanted, he whispered. You were my only light. I just didn't know how to hold it without breaking it. He lowered himself slowly into the chair, as if the weight of centuries finally felt heavy. Alina found herself speaking before she could overthink. Then maybe, she said gently, tonight is where you learn. He looked up, surprised. A maid, someone invisible to the world, had said something kings usually never hear. Truth without fear. A humility without humiliation. A small smile touched his lips, not grand, not dramatic, human. Perhaps, he murmured. The girl slid off the chair and walked toward him slowly. She stood right in front of him, studying his face with childlike seriousness. If I stay with you, she said, will you listen when I'm scared? His answer came instantly. Oh, yes. Will you choose kindness, even when power feels easier? His throat tightened. I will try, he said honestly, and when I fail, I will try again. The girl nodded, satisfied with something deeper than promises. Effort. She stepped forward and for the first time placed her small hand in his. The king froze, not out of fear, but because the moment felt sacred. Delicate, like touching sunlight after years of darkness. Alina watched quietly, warmth spreading through her chest. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something fragile, and fragile things require courage. Suddenly, a soft knock echoed from the far side of the kitchen. Not like before, not threatening, just hesitant. The three exchanged glances. The king rose slowly, still holding his daughter's hand, and walked toward the sound. Alina followed, careful, heart pounding. The door opened slightly, revealing one of the older night guards, face pale, eyes full of confusion. Sir, ma'am, the lobby is filling with people, he said shakily. Someone spread a rumor that the king of the night is here. The girl tightened her grip. The king didn't show fear. But for the first time, he looked truly vulnerable. Then the world, he said softly, has finally turned to watch. And whatever happened next would decide what kind of story they would live in. Fear or compassion, the guards' words lingered in the air like a faint echo. People were gathering, curious people, Fearful people, people who believed legends more than truth. The vampire king stood still, listening not with his ears, but with something deeper. He could feel the hum of nerves, the tremble of rumor, the weight of fear pressing in from the lobby like a slow tide. The little girl looked up at him. "Oh, are they here to hurt us?" Oh, he shook his head gently. "They are here because they don't understand. When people don't understand something, they imagine the worst." Elena understood that all too well. Poor maids, unseen workers, people judged before anyone ever asked their story. Oh, she stepped beside them. "Then maybe tonight," she said softly, "they need to see something true." Oh, he glanced at her. Something like gratitude and quiet trust passed through his eyes. They walked together toward the lobby. The hallway felt long, as if time had slowed to let courage catch up with them. Distant murmurs grew louder. Whispers swirled like leaves. "Oh, is it him? Oh, they say he drinks shadows. Don't look into his eyes. All the myth, all the fear." The king paused just short of the lobby entrance. For a brief second, doubt flickered across his face, rare, fragile. "If I step out," he murmured, "I become the story they choose to tell." Alina nodded. "Then give them a story worth telling." Oh, he took a breath. Not the breath of a predator. The breath of someone choosing gentleness when he had every reason to hide. They stepped into the lobby. The room fell silent instantly. Dozens of eyes turned toward them, some widened in fear, some in fascination, others in suspicion. The girl's hand tightened around his. Well, the king didn't bare his fangs. Well, he didn't show power. He simply knelt right there on the polished floor, so he was eye level with the child beside him. The crowd murmured, uncertain. He spoke quietly, but every word carried. "I am not what the stories made me," he said. "I have lived long, and yes, I have made mistakes, but the child standing with me is not a symbol, not a threat, not a message." He looked around the room, letting his gaze soften. "She is my daughter, and tonight someone thought fear would be stronger than compassion." He reached gently, touching the bracelet on her wrist. Fear failed. A silence deeper than any rumor followed. People shifted. Eyes softened. Some shoulders lowered. One woman in the back whispered, "She's just a little girl." And suddenly, the room stopped seeing a legend. They saw a father and a child who had spent too long feeling unwanted. The king continued, voice steady. "I do not ask you to love me. I do not ask you to forget the things you have heard. I ask only this: do not build your fear on the back of a child." The little girl looked at him, then at the people, and took a brave step closer, still holding his hand. "I just want to stay with my dad," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The words cut through everything. Someone at the front lowered his head. Another quietly wiped tears. And slowly, gently, the crowd began to disperse. Not because they were ordered, but because they understood. Because kindness, when shown honestly, makes fear feel small. The lobby emptied. Only the guard remained, stunned. I've never seen anything like that," he whispered. Alina smiled softly. "That's what happens," she said, "when truth walks in without shouting." The king looked at both of them, overwhelmed, humbled, deeply changed. Oh, he turned to Elena. "You protected her when the world looked away," he said quietly. "I owe you a debt I may never repay." Oh, she shook her head. "Then don't repay it," she answered gently. "Just live differently because of it." That, more than anything, felt like the real miracle. The girl leaned against him, eyes finally peaceful. "Can we go home now?" she asked. Well, he nodded, not the king of nights. "Just a father." "Yes, but not the way before." He took one last look at Alina with gratitude that needed no more words, then walked with his daughter into the deep, quiet night. Not to disappear, to begin again. And somewhere far beyond the city, the people who had tried to use fear as a weapon realized something they had not expected. When compassion becomes stronger than darkness, their power has already begun to break.